I want to start with something the big banks and the financial channels would rather you never sit with for very long. The men who run the Federal Reserve just made a decision, and within minutes the talking heads had already told you what it meant. They gave you the tidy summary, the calm voice, the reassurance that everything is under control and there is nothing here for a retiree to worry about. And that, right there, is the tell. When the people who profit from your confusion are this quick to explain your feelings away, it is usually because there is something in the room they do not want you looking at directly. If you are holding gold or silver right now, or if you have been thinking about it while you watch what is happening to the dollar in your own grocery cart, this decision was aimed straight at your retirement, whether anyone said so out loud or not. What the Fed just told gold and silver holders was not really about a rate at all. It was about who gets to decide what your money is worth and whether that decision belongs to you or to them. Stay with me, because by the end of this I am going to show you the one thing the smart money already understands about this moment that almost nobody on television is willing to say to your face. Here is the concrete thing to hold on to, the down payment before we go deep. For most of this country's history, the value of a dollar was not a market outcome at all. It was a political choice, argued over, voted on, fought about in the open. Whether your money was tied to metal or cut loose from it was decided by people in power, not by supply and demand. That has not changed. It has only gotten quieter. And a quiet political decision about the worth of your savings is far more dangerous to you than a loud one, because you never get the chance to see it coming. Let me take you back to a fight most Americans have completely forgotten, even though it was once the single biggest argument in the entire country. In the 1890s, the United States was tearing itself apart over one question, and the question was this: what should stand behind a dollar? On one side stood the banks and the creditors and the Eastern financial establishment, who wanted the dollar backed strictly by gold, because a scarce, hard money protected the value of the loans they had made. On the other side stood the farmers and the workers and the debtors of the heartland, who were being crushed as prices fell year after year, who wanted silver brought back into the money to loosen it, to give them a little air. This was not a small technical dispute for economists. It was the defining political battle of a generation. And it came to a head when a young man stood up in front of a national convention and delivered a speech so thunderous it is still remembered more than a century later. He told the powerful men of finance that they would not press down upon the brow of labor a crown of thorns, that they would not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. The hall came apart. He won his party's nomination on the strength of it. And the whole country understood, in that moment, exactly what was at stake, whether ordinary people or the money interests would decide the nature of the dollar. Now here is the part the financial channels will never frame for you this way. He lost. The gold side won that fight. The country stayed on the gold standard, hard money held, and for a time the men who wanted your money scarce and disciplined got exactly what they wanted. But the lesson of that whole episode is not who won a single election. The lesson is that the worth of your money has always been up for grabs at the political level, decided by whoever holds power in a given decade, tilted toward whoever that power is trying to protect. It was never a law of nature. It was always a choice. And whoever makes that choice is choosing whose savings win and whose savings quietly lose. This is the through line I need you to carry through everything that follows, because it explains what the Fed just did far better than any headline. When policymakers gather and decide whether to hold, whether to squeeze, whether to loosen, they are doing the exact same thing the country did in the 1890s. They are deciding the nature of your money. The only difference is they no longer do it in front of a roaring convention hall. They do it in a quiet room, in careful language, and then they send someone out to tell you it was all very technical and very boring, and there is nothing here for you. Look at what actually happened with this latest decision. Stripped of the spin, you had a divided group of policymakers. You had the current chair, Kevin Warsh, presiding over a genuinely split room, with real dissent, with some members openly wanting to move in a harder direction, while others held back. That division is the story. A unified central bank projects confidence. A divided one is a central bank that does not actually know the way through, that is arguing internally about how much pain to accept and who should bear it. And when the people steering the value of your dollar are that split behind closed doors, the calm face they show the public is a performance, not a fact. Think about what a split, uncertain group of policymakers means for the metal you own. Gold and silver do not pay you interest. Their great rival, the one true enemy of the metal, is a bond that pays a solid, real return above inflation. When the authorities can credibly offer you that, the metal struggles. But when they are divided, when they are flinching, when it is not clear they have the stomach to hold the line against rising prices, that real return becomes doubtful. And the moment the promise of being paid to wait in paper starts to wobble, the case for owning something that cannot be printed, cannot be voted into existence, and cannot be inflated away gets stronger by the day. Let me pause here, because this is exactly the point where a smart retiree starts to feel the stakes, and I do not want to just leave you with the fear. I want to hand you the door out of it. Here is something most people never learn until it is too late. The largest, most sophisticated buyers of gold on the entire planet are not hedge funds, and they are not day traders. They are the central banks themselves. The same institutions that manage national reserves have been buying physical gold at a record pace for years running, buying it regardless of the price, because they understand something about paper promises that they would prefer ordinary savers never think too hard about. Gold sitting in your own possession cannot be frozen by another country and cannot be printed away by your own. And here is the part almost nobody tells you. There is a perfectly legal, quiet way for an ordinary American retiree to do the very same thing the central banks are doing. You can move a portion of the retirement savings you already have, the money sitting in a traditional retirement account, into real physical gold and silver, held for you, without triggering taxes and without triggering penalties, by using a self-directed precious metals retirement account. This is not some exotic club for insiders. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, this is available to you, the same protection the biggest institutions on earth are quietly reaching for. If you want to understand exactly how it works, I have put together a free guide that walks through all of it in plain language. If you are watching this on your television, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. It costs you nothing, and it will show you the mechanics the financial channels skip right over. Now, let me take you deeper, because the 1890s fight was not the last time policy, not the market, set the stage for everything that followed. It has happened again and again, and each time the pattern was the same: a decision made by people in power that quietly rewrote what your savings were worth. There was the moment decades later when the government simply revalued gold overnight by decree, moving the official price up in a single stroke by roughly 2/3. Ordinary people did not vote on that. They woke up and the worth of the dollar in gold had been changed for them, by decree, from above. There was the era after the Second World War when the world's currencies were tied to a gold-backed dollar, a whole global system resting on that promise, until one day in the early 1970s, the promise was simply cut. The gold window was closed, the tie to metal was severed, and every dollar in every American's pocket became a pure political instrument, worth whatever the authorities decided it should be worth. Again, no convention hall, no roaring crowd, no vote by the people whose savings were affected. Just a decision, announced and then explained away as necessary and technical and nothing for you to worry about. And notice the enemy in every one of these stories is the same. It is the people who benefit when you do not understand what is being decided. In the 1890s, it was the creditors who wanted your money scarce. In the modern era, it is the big banks and the trading desks and the financial media who make their living on your churn and your fear, who need you calm and passive and fully invested in paper promises, because a retiree who quietly moves a slice of savings into metal they cannot touch is a retiree who has stepped partly outside their reach. That is why the coverage of a Fed decision is always so soothing. A frightened, thinking retiree is bad for their business. A reassured, sleepy one is exactly what they want. Here is the midpoint turn, the part that actually changes how you should see this. For most of modern history, there was a reliable rule. When real returns on bonds went up, gold went down. Because why hold a metal that pays nothing when paper pays you well? That rule was supposed to be iron. And recently, it broke. Gold has climbed even in periods when it, by the old logic, should have fallen. The old inverse relationship simply stopped holding. Now, why would a rule that worked for decades suddenly stop working? Because the buyers who are driving the price now are not making the old calculation at all. They are not asking what the metal yields this quarter. They are asking whether the whole system of paper promises can still be trusted. And that is a very different, much deeper question. That shift is the single most important thing happening beneath the surface, and it ties directly back to our 1890s fight. Gold has been quietly taking its place back among the primary reserves of the world's central banks, overtaking other major reserve currencies to sit just behind the dollar itself as something these institutions hold to protect themselves. This did not happen by accident. It accelerated after the world watched one major power have its foreign reserves frozen, and every other central bank on Earth absorbed the lesson in an instant. A reserve you hold as somebody else's promise can be switched off, but metal in your own vault cannot. That is a policy-driven stampede toward hard money, playing out right now, and it is being led by the very institutions that understand money best. And I do not want to leave silver out of this, because silver sits right at the heart of that old fight, and it carries a lesson all its own. Remember, the whole battle in the 1890s was about silver, about whether it belonged in the money at all. And the powerful men of finance fought to keep it out precisely because it threatened their control. That political shadow has hung over silver ever since, and it shows up in the price to this day. Silver has run up to a ceiling near $50 an ounce not once but twice across the span of a working lifetime, roughly 3 decades apart, and both times it was turned back. The base underneath that ceiling is something like half a century long. Think about what that means. A metal that has been pressed down and held below the same level for that many years is not a metal that has run out of room. It is a coiled spring that the market has simply not been allowed to price properly yet. And the structure beneath silver is tighter than most retirees ever hear. The world has been using up more silver than it produces, year after year, running a genuine deficit, because silver is not just money, it is an industrial metal, woven into the machinery of modern life. And here is the cruel part for anyone hoping to find it later. Gold gets hoarded, carefully saved and vaulted, while silver gets burned, dispersed in tiny amounts across countless devices, and largely never recovered. Once it is used, it is gone. So you have a metal held down for decades by a ceiling that traces all the way back to a political fight over whether it should count as money, sitting on top of a real physical shortage. That is a very unusual thing to find sitting quietly, unremarked, while the financial channels talk about everything except it. So let me stand back and say plainly what the Fed just told gold and silver holders, because this is where I resolve the question that brought you here. It did not tell you a rate. It told you that the value of your dollar remains, exactly as it was in the 1890s, a political decision made by a divided group of powerful people who are arguing behind closed doors about how much of the cost you should quietly absorb. It told you the referee of your money's worth is uncertain and split. And it told you, if you were listening past the reassurance, that the biggest and best informed players in the world have already decided not to fully trust that referee, and have been buying the one asset no policymaker can vote out of existence. Now, let me give you the honest caution, because I will not insult you with a promise. I cannot tell you gold will hit a particular price, and I cannot tell you when. The metal is volatile. History is full of gut-wrenching drops right in the middle of powerful bull runs, times when the metal was cut nearly in half mid-climb before going on to multiply many times over. Times when the exchanges themselves raised the cost of holding a position and knocked prices down hard in a matter of days, while nothing about the real world had changed at all. This is a case built on structure and history and the behavior of the smartest money, not a guarantee, and it is not personal financial advice. If you own metal, own the real thing, the physical metal, not a paper claim on it. Size your position so that a sharp drop can never force you to sell at the bottom. And whatever you do not let a manufactured shakeout scare you into handing your metal to the very people who engineered the fear. Here is what I most want you to sit with before you go. The part 1 I promised at the very beginning. Right now, you are early. The central banks already know. The most sophisticated money on the planet has already positioned itself, quietly, at a record pace, while the price was well below where anyone will be talking about it once it becomes obvious. The pension funds, the mainstream advisors, the financial channels, they have not caught on yet. Or they have caught on and they are not saying it to you. And by the time this is the story on every news segment, by the time your neighbor and your brother-in-law are all suddenly experts, the easy part of this move will already be behind us. That is how these things always work. Nobody sends you an invitation. Nobody calls you and tells you the window is open. The people who benefit most are the ones who understood and acted while it still felt too early, while it still felt quiet. while the official voice was still telling everyone there was nothing to see. So if you have watched this all the way to the end, you are exactly the kind of person this next part is for. For those of you with $100,000 or more in a retirement account, I offer a free one-on-one educational web conference where we walk through your specific situation, no obligation and no pressure, and show you exactly how retirees are protecting a portion of their savings with physical metal inside the accounts they already have. Mention that you watched this full video. And let me give you the honest reason to do it now rather than someday. The moment to make a calm, clear decision is precisely the moment when nothing feels urgent, when the room is still quiet, before the crowd arrives and the choice gets expensive and crowded and rushed. That window is open right now. If you are watching on your television, scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. Because in the end, this all comes back to that young man in front of that roaring hall more than a century ago, telling the powerful they would not decide the worth of ordinary people's money without a fight. He lost his fight in the open, but the deeper truth he was pointing at has never stopped being true. The value of your dollar is a choice made by people in power, and it always has been. The only question left is whether you will wait to be told what your savings are worth, or whether you will quietly do what the central banks are already doing, and hold a little of the one kind of money that no room full of policymakers can ever vote away from you.